Hi everyone, my name is Mary Magnuson and I work for Blandin Foundation as administrator of the Blandin Community Broadband Program. It's my pleasure today to welcome you to the 8th in our Broadband Leadership webinar series on creating successful broadband infrastructure projects, federal and state broadband finance programs. We're offering these webinars to community leaders interested in learning about broadband infrastructure project planning best practices and tips, from partnering effectively with ISPs and units of government to working with broadband consultants to successfully applying for public funds. And now let's get started. Today's moderator is Bill Coleman of Community Technology Advisors, one of our primary broadband program consultants. He will set the stage for today's webinar and introduce the speakers. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Mary. Good morning, everyone. Today we're talking about federal and state broadband finance programs, and we've got a great combination of telecom providers, internet service providers, and folks from agencies that help facilitate the funding of those projects. In business, nothing happens till somebody buys something. And so financing is a key part of this. We can have all the dreams we want and visions and studies, but until you can really line up the financing that allows, depending on your ISP provider, the ability at a minimum to pay the bills, and that on the more private side, the ability to make some extra profit as a result of that. Nothing can really happen until you can arrange financing that enables that to happen. We know that financing infrastructure is a long-term thought. You know, it's not like buying a car or something that lasts 2 to 3 to 5 years. This infrastructure, we know fibers and towers, radios need to last quite a while or they do last a long time. And that's why the financing should really match the life of the asset. And my old life as an economic developer, being certified as an economic development finance professional, you know, they always talked about making the financing last as long as the asset. So especially businesses can grow and so on. So today we have Jim Beatty from BevCom, Stacy Clough from Mille Lacs Energy Cooperative, Angie Dickinson from the Minnesota Office of Broadband Development, and Scott Woods has a job of representing the entire federal government as from Ntia, which is the National Telecommunication and Information Agency. And so without much further ado, we're going to move on here pretty quickly. You've all seen my little slide here about the poor broadband to great broadband process. Really looks more like this, and probably with many more arrows pointing back towards the beginning to reconsider your business plan, your financing plan, so on. So today we'll learn more about the financing plans, and those happen as you think about your provider partnerships, and it happens as you negotiate that final deal with funders. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jim Beatty from BevCom. They're an excellent ISP telecommunications provider headquartered in Blue Earth, Minnesota. Jim?
Yes, Bill, thank you. I guess I'm going to talk about some of our broadband projects that we've been involved with through the Minnesota, through the DEED office and the Office of Broadband Development. We have participated in that program since 2015. And we have applied, in that period of time, we have applied for 15 grants and we have received 12. We're also very fortunate that we also have operations in Wisconsin. Wisconsin has a very vibrant broadband development grant program, and we have participated in that, and we've received 4 grants in Wisconsin. So kind of how all this started for us was the program started in 2014 here in Minnesota, and we decided the first year just to kind of see how it was going to operate. And we had other colleague companies around the state who did participate the first year, said it was a very good experience. And so we started to apply for grants in, again, as I said, in 2015. It's a public-private partnership program, as you all know. And in the beginning, our public partner was solely the Minnesota Office of Broadband Development. We kind of targeted our grants to those areas that were the most remote and difficult to serve for us in our own service territories. And we tried to be very surgical in picking the amount of the grant funds that we would need as a private company and not a co-op. We are concerned about return on investment. So we decided that we would figure out what we needed to turn these areas from a 15 to 20 year return on investment to a 6 or 7 year return on investment, which was practical for us. And so initially we started asking for grants in the neighborhood of 38 to 40% of the total cost of the project. And I think that that proven to be successful for us. Since then, we've expanded our public partners in this. In our most recent grant application, our largest one, the one that most people are aware of, is our LeSueur County grant, which we did in conjunction with LeSueur County and some of the townships that were affected there. They committed to $300,000 for the cost of our project. And that one we saw at 50% because we were going to be going outside of our traditional service territory. And we were not as clear about, the take rates and stuff in those areas. So we did ask for the full 50% match from the state. In some other areas, we've been somewhat creative in getting public partnerships in the form of counties in other areas, in Faribault County and Goodhue County in particular, who agreed to pay, to give us a short-term balloon loan in the neighborhood of $10,000 to $15,000 to cover engineering costs. So that was an additional public partnership. It gives the community some skin in the game. And I think that that's what these grant programs are now looking for. They're looking for community involvement, and that's been a way for us to do that. So we've been very happy with the program. The state and the counties and our local government partners have been great partners in this. And I do think that the Minnesota Border Broadband Grant Program is it is the model for the nation, and we're just glad to be able to take part in that. As for RDOF, we're looking at that, and we hope to participate in that. And we found some areas that we'd be interested in entering in the auction. So with that, I'll conclude and allow the other speakers to give their thoughts.
Jim, could you just say a little bit about what RDOF is?
Well, RDOF is an auction initiated by the FCC to allow companies to go into areas and receive federal funding for areas that maybe have been given up by some of the larger ILECs around the country. They just don't think they have the financial capability, or again, the return on investment to make those viable areas. And so those have been opened up. And so we're looking at those. There's kind of a twofold process to that. One was the challenge process. We had to challenge some of the areas in our LeSueur County grant area. So the challenges just went in recently. I don't know exactly when. And then we're going to be participating in some of those areas that are up for auction now.
Great, thank you. Next, we'll call on Stacy Clough. Stacy is the IT manager turned ISP director for Mille Lacs Energy Cooperative in central Minnesota. And welcome, Stacy.
Hi, good morning. So a little bit about who we are. Mille Lacs Energy, we're an electric cooperative. We're member owned. So we're not trying to make a profit, but we're trying to bring much needed services to the people that live in our rural areas. We always say internet today is just like how electric was 75 years ago. You know, it's essential for today's business world or everyday world. And, you know, we're really seeing that true now with the COVID-19, that all the schools are distance learning and everyone's remote working. You know, broadband is required to live now, and the places that don't have it are falling behind, and it's just becoming more evident. Little history about Mille Lacs. We got into the internet business back in 1997 when our local CLECs were not offering any type of dial-up internet, so we decided to do it. Over the years, we started offering fixed wireless and satellite options, and we still offer satellite today, which is extremely busy with Viasat. And it's a gap filler until something better can come along. But we closed our fixed wireless last year just because the maintenance on it, and we really see the futures in our fiber business. In 2016, we partnered with CTC, a telephone cooperative out of Brainerd, and we applied for a Minnesota border-to-border grant to bring fiber to 800 members in the Aiken County area, just south of Aiken. It's a very rural area. This was our phase 1 project, and it was the start of our fiber network and a great partnership that we formed with CTC. Since 2016, we've applied for both federal and state grants with success. And 2019 was a really good year for Mille Lacs. We applied for a USDA RUS Community Connect Loan, our grant. And this is a 85% funded grant and a 15% match for areas that do not have 10-1 internet access, and for both wireline and cellular services. I want to note that this is not an ETC status requirement for this grant, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later on about what that means for Mille Lacs. Another big requirement was the need to provide service to community center type facilities, whether it be like a town hall or a meeting place for the community to come to, and the awardee must supply 2 years of free internet and Wi-Fi access to that location. There was allowance in the grant to construct and build something needed and buy computers and office space to make available for the public to use. So when we're trying to determine a location, I mean, we have lots of areas in our whole service area, and especially Aiken County. We kind of focused over on the east side of Aiken County, over south of McGregor, because it's also home to the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, called the East Lake area. And then we chose this area because it's served by Frontier currently, and you know, during the initial research, you know, there was either you couldn't get DSL service from them, or you would only get like 1 meg down and half a meg up. And so it was a great opportunity to go in there and bring some much needed service to this area. And through our partnership with CTC, it was also a great, we had a great opportunity to connect with NESC out of their McGregor to bring fiber, and then to the home to all those over 200 members with 1 gig up, 1 gig down opportunities if needed. For this project, we were awarded $1.9 million, and with overall cost being $2.2 million. It's about a 20-mile long area going down Highway 65 south of McGregor. So we're excited to get started on that. Things are a bit slower than we want it to be, but hopefully we'll get construction going on that this summer. Also, in 2019, we applied for another border-to-border grant with the state to continue expanding our phase 1 and phase 2 areas. Oh, I was going to share my screen here so you can see what we got going on. Okay. There we go. Oh, let me try that again.
Oh, it looks.
Oh, were you seeing it? Okay.
Sure.
Is it a map?
Now we're seeing a Windows window, but it was an app
Gosh.
the first time.
Okay. Sorry about that. Now I seem to have lost. Oh, here we are.
It takes just a moment when you share your screen.
Okay, we'll get this. Okay, that's the one I want. Okay,
That looks
hopefully a map is showing of our service area. So just, I wanted to just show you, so that East Lake I was just talking about, the USDA grant, is the one in purple. So, and this is our whole service area. It's quite large, you know, you see Mille Lacs there and then you go up north. So we're in parts of Aiken County, Crow Wing County, and Mille Lacs County. So it's a lot to focus on, but you know, our lowest served unserved area is Aiken County. So that's been one of our major focuses. But it's a lot of rural, sparsely populated people, so it'll take a while. Okay, but back to our phase 3 grant we got. The project was about 1/2 unserved and about 1/2 underserved for the requirements, and it's a good mix. It's all currently served by CenturyLink, so the struggles there are real. That, you know, they might say they have 25/3, but nobody in that area, I can pretty much confirm, it does have that. So they're super excited that we're coming in, and we are starting on that project. Right now we should be getting construction going later this summer too. It's a good gap filler for phase 1 and phase 2 projects that are in the orange, and the green is our phase 3. I want to note that Mille Lacs, when we're building, we're going to build to everybody. We're not just going to hit the high density areas and leave the people that are a 1/2 mile or a mile down that road without service. We want to get to everybody. I know there's some providers in our area that are just coming in, hitting those heavy populated lakes and leaving everyone else, you know, without anything. So we want to get to everybody. Let's see. Okay. You know, I want to mention that we did not participate in the FCC CAF2 fund program or the reconnects at this point. Well, the reason for that, we currently don't have ETC status, and that is a big requirement for those programs. So we're contemplating what we do with that. Looking at the not having the ETC status has affected the funding we're able to qualify for, and we're just, but also, you know, what's available in those areas. Like, did it make sense for us to apply because were they connected to areas that we could get to, or were they off way far away that we didn't have any connections? But we're currently looking and determining, you know, what would be our best option for the RDOF funding. We plan to participate in this, whether it be getting ETC status or another way. And we're weighing our pros and cons on all the opportunities right now. You know, our service area has many opportunities for bidding, and we don't want to miss out on that. This auction is far too valuable to pass up, and if we want to ensure our members have access to reliable broadband network for the future, and so we don't want to. We know we need to get involved to bring this to them. So those are the main things about our funding and why and where we've gone and what makes sense for us now. And you know, if we figure out what we're going to do with that ETC status, whether we get it or we partner or something else, it could change and give us a lot more opportunities to get more funding. As an electric co-op, part of our decision making on where we build, we're kind of guided by the locations of our substations, and they're scattered all around this area. I don't have them showing on the map, but if you think about, they're scattered everywhere. And so to date, we have 2 substations connected, and we plan to have 2 more by the end of 2020. And that really just helps us keep our rates down for our members and helps with all of our future smart grid and AMI deployment that we're currently working on. So what else? So with just a note, as a cooperative, we've invested over $5 million of our own member money, and then another about $5 million in grants have helped us build a $11 million network. So it's, you know, it's big, it's exciting, and everyone's all on board, and we're going to keep building out as fast and, I guess, cost efficient as we can. So.
Hi, Stacy. This is Dave Shornack. And what has been your take rate, and has it your take rate met any budgets. Do you have any built out that you're actually serving people and it has
Yep.
What's your take rate? And
In that orange area, we're right at about 50%.
okay.
So it's been really good. Yeah, we can't complain about that.
I assume that's above budget then.
Yep, I think we went in at 50%, you know, and not really sure when we started, just by the guidance of CTCs and two. And so, yeah, it was about what we budgeted for. And I even think we ran some numbers with less. And so when we got that, we were pleasantly surprised, but we know the need was there. And so I think in that orange area will be higher than 50% by year end, because now we're even adding more and more. Every year people are connecting in.
Stacy, could you talk a little bit about the decision in your board and their attitude towards the broadband investments?
Yeah, that's been a long, slow process. When we first started in 2016, they were about half and half. Half were excited, and it's the same board to date. Half were pretty excited, and half were very leery about it all. And we've got one financial guy that just rubs his head, and it wasn't on board per se, but he went along. But going forward now, anything we present to them, they're like, yep, let's do it. We know it, we need it this year. Our budget process, our plans, grants we want to go for, this and that, they were all just, yep, let's do it. We need to do it. So as long as we do it financially smart and the grants are helping, like this year getting, what do we have, over 3 million in grants? That's huge. So to help us continue to do this, they realize the importance of it all.
Have you approached Aiken County about somehow collaborating on the RDOF auction?
Not on the RDOF auction. No, we have not with them.
Okay. And we'll talk more about RDOF as we go today, but I think it's so important to, whatever happens in this auction is going to have a generational impact on rural communities, I believe.
I agree. Yeah, we don't want to miss out on it.
Great. Are you done?
Yep, that's all I had.
Okay, great. Thank you. And if you want to stop sharing your screen, that would be perfect.
There you go.
Next up is Angie Dickinson with the State of Minnesota's Office of Broadband Development. We started working with Angie, at the Blandin Foundation when she was IT director of Lake County, and then was, for some sad reason, decided to move to Wisconsin for a short time. But we're happy to have her back here in Minnesota, and she's now directing that office. Angie, welcome. Angie, you might be muted. Or disappeared.
I'll unmute first
Oh,
and
there
then
we
I'll
go.
continue sharing
Thank
my
you.
screen so you know I haven't totally disappeared. Good morning, everyone. Just trying to get my slides up here. Bear with me. I'm not sure what you all see.
We see your slides.
Okay, so I just need to resume the show, I bet. Okay, so you're seeing are my slides advancing, Bill?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks to Blandin for bringing us all together again to talk about broadband expansion opportunities. As we all know, these are extraordinary times, and the need for digital equity and high-speed internet access for all Minnesotans has never been more apparent. We are fortunate that thanks to folks like at MLEC and BevCom and the other providers in our state, that many of our communities have access to reliable high-speed internet service. And we're grateful for the commitment of these folks who are working so tirelessly to keep us connected during this pandemic. At the same time, we're also acutely aware of the gaps in broadband coverage in our state and the importance of continuing our work to meet our state's broadband goals. And COVID-19 has certainly intensified our sense of urgency as so many of us need connectivity for distance learning, telemedicine, and telecommuting. Yet we remain hopeful, and I'm certain that Minnesota will come through this stronger, and conversations like the one we're having today will help us to keep moving forward. The Border-to-Border Broadband Development Grant Program was created in 2014, and the legislative focus of this grant program is to provide state resources to help make the financial case for new and existing providers to invest in building broadband infrastructure into unserved and underserved areas of the state. The grants can provide up to 50% of a project's infrastructure costs, such as project planning, permits, construction, plant and labor, installation and testing, engineering, etc. The maximum grant amount is $5 million. The smallest project awarded to date funded the deployment of broadband infrastructure to 12 locations, and the largest projects have funded deployment to thousands of locations. Grants are awarded through a competitive grant application process. In each year that the grant program has been offered, applications have exceeded the available funding. In the 2019 legislative session, $20 million was appropriated for each of the next 2 years. To award the $20 million appropriated for 2019, our office held a competitive grant round similar to the process used for awarding grants in prior years. The legislature has also appropriated $20 million for a 2020 grant round. The application period has not yet opened for that grant round, although we are encouraging folks to sign up for email updates regarding key dates and the opening of this next funding opportunity. So stay tuned. Our grant program has had annual general fund appropriations in 6 out of 7 years. Awards are distributed in a single competitive grant round each fiscal year that funding is received. The technology must be scalable to at least 100 megabits symmetrical, and awards are capped, as I said, at $5 million per year, with at least a 1-to-1 match of 50% of eligible expenses being required. This is an area where our program can align nicely with other state and federal grant funding opportunities. And as folks have mentioned, I know we're all very interested in what's going to happen with the RDOF auction, and stay tuned there as well. Our team has been talking to a number of folks about how our program can best align with that opportunity, and actually seeking input from folks. If you have ideas for us about how best we may do that, we'd be happy to chat. Our grant awards are also required to be geographically dispersed, and the speeds offered must achieve at least a 25.3 speed level, and many offer 100 by 20 or a gigabit or more. This slide is a reminder about who is eligible to apply for our grants, and it can be basically summarized as anyone who is able to prove they have the wherewithal to build and sustain the delivery of high-quality broadband services. This slide is our summary of the 5 years the program has been funded. The map shows that there have been awards made in all regions of the state, except notably the areas that are already served. $105 million in state funds have leveraged over $146 million in private and local matching funds that have been used largely to push service into unserved areas. 80 of the 110 projects funded in the first 4 years have been completed, and the contracts have been executed for the 30 new projects awarded in January. In closing, I also encourage community leaders to sign up for our updates from our office, and please don't hesitate to contact us if you have additional questions. We're happy to help. That's it. Thank you, Bill.
Great. Angie, do you have any initial thoughts on the RDOF collaboration, or too early to say?
It's really too early to say. I wish I did have, I knew folks, particularly with this conversation today, would be very interested in our thoughts. I think as we're looking at pending legislation at the state level that may impact our program, just looking how best we can time our next funding opportunity to align with RDOF, as well as take advantage of the possibility of pairing those funds in the best way possible.
Great, thanks, Angie. So the, let's see here, looking at, any thoughts on, we see that there's legislation now for 10 million additional dollars, both in the House and the Senate, and anything you have to ask about that or have to say about that?
Just that stay tuned. I can't comment specifically on that legislation. We're hopeful about additional funding for the program, but also understand we're in extraordinary times. So I don't envy the work of our legislators during this crisis, right? With that
But
said,
of course, for those who are trying to get broadband services, a call to their own legislator would probably be smart.
you know, I
know you can talk on that, so that's cool.
But what I will say is that our office will be ready to go. When session ends, however that comes out, we'll be ready to roll with whatever comes our way and continue our work with the outstanding partners we have across the state. We'll be ready.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Next up is Scott Woods with Ntia, and we're happy to have a federal person on our panel today. And you know, the federal funds come from so many different places that we could have a full webinar just with federal sources. But Scott's going to give us some tips on how to think about the federal dollars in a strategic way. Welcome, Scott.
It would help if I was off mute. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me here with you today. So I believe you have some slides up. I'm going to ask that you put the slides up. I'm going to talk briefly, just provide an overview of the Broadband USA Technical Assistance Program at Ntia, and then really get into the crux of why I'm here is to talk about all the various federal sources of funding for broadband. So if you can go to the first slide, please.
Are you seeing that now?
We see your drive information, but not.
Oh, sorry, let me
sorry.
Stop and I'll do that again. Good?
Yep, there we go. If you go to the first slide, please, next slide. All right, thanks. So first of all, just very briefly, I want to give an overview of for those who are not aware, Ntia. The Ntia, we advise the executive branch on telecom policy issues, both domestically and internationally. And it's really, the goal is to serve, you know, 4 broad goals. Number 1, expanding broadband access and adoption, expanding the use of federal spectrum, ensuring that the internet remains an engine for continued economic innovation and growth, and then supporting public safety communications. And we do that through various platforms within Ntia. Next slide, please. So under Broadband USA, the program that I manage is the Technical Assistance Program. And we're really designed to educate all stakeholders across various different disciplines, whether that's business leaders, political leaders, community leaders, education, public safety, and in the medical field now with telemedicine being very important. We provide helpful resources, funding information, education with how to deal with the private sector, how to interact with all the various sources of federal funds and the rules that apply to each. We bring together the right people to have the right conversations and then try to provide useful guidance to stakeholders, partners, and service providers. Next slide, please. So we really focus on three sort of broad silos, if you will, and they all are based on community outcomes, right? We do a lot of products and events. So if you go to our website, and I think we've shared the website link to you today, but you can find a lot of products and events. We publish guidance and how-to kits and tools, share best practices. Right now, we have a very big mapping pilot that's going on. Right now, it's about 8 states and it's growing. But we understand the challenges with the current mapping tools that are aligned to federal funding. And so we've designed a pilot program called Congress authorized a pilot program for our mapping program where we're really going on the granular level, focusing in on address granularity and really focusing on unserved and underserved areas. So you have to know where broadband is and is not at the address level, because as you know, some of the limitations with some of the federal programs are tied to census tract. So we're constantly building that, and we clarify policies with other federal agencies to ensure that broadband can be funded in some of the agency's traditional grant programs and loan programs. And then we offer technical assistance to specific communities in both infrastructure and digital inclusion to ensure that the communities are embarking upon the right strategy as they move forward. Next slide, please. And then, so I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here. You all know this, but under the technical assistance umbrella, you know, we primarily help the communities that we deal with. To date, it's been over 480 communities. Really 3 main areas: planning, funding, and implementation. We're looking to planning areas, you know, how to get started, what do we do, how do we educate stakeholders, how do we work with service providers. Funding, what's the right strategy to pursue? There's really no one-size-fits-all strategy. It's going to depend on each different project, but there are a number of different strategies that a community can embark upon, including partnership facilitation, right, the various funding options, and then how to execute that strategy. And then finally, implementation, right? Actually building out the network to ensure sustainability and design and stated use for your target audience and customers and jurisdictions. Over the life of our program, we've worked 90% with the requests that have come in for technical assistance involve planning, like how to get started, what do I do? 62% and growing every day involve questions related to funding. Next slide, please. And so this is why I'm here today, to really talk about what we've done at NTIA. On our website, we have what we call a one-stop shop for federal funding information. We have a searchable digital database on our website that outlines and provides the criteria for all of the federal sources of federal funding for broadband and digital inclusion assistance that exists today. Luckily, we just updated this information this week to include all of the through FY20 information. And so you can access this digitally, or if you want to download a PDF of this, you can access that same link on our website. So the most up-to-date information is on our website. I encourage everyone to access our site to get that information, review it, and then make specific decisions as you move forward. It's not just, excuse me, it's not just, you know, an outline of every single federal source of broadband planning and funding, excuse me, but it breaks down the criteria for each program. And then also, you know, the application criteria, the funding criteria linked to that process, and then any other helpful information that a community or individual or service provider would need to be able to make an informed decision to move forward to pursue that funding. Next slide, please. So just a representative sample of what you will find on the funding guide or the funding site. The USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture, specifically the Rural Utility Service, has several different funding mechanisms under its traditional telecommunications loan and grant program. Under Farm Bill, they provide money for broadband. And then through their $600 million per year under their Reconnect program, which specifically is designed to connect rural communities. We talked a little bit about, you've heard about the FCC and the Rural Digital Opportunities Fund, or the RDOF. That's a $20 billion fund over the next 10 years, specifically tied to rural communities, and not just the tier 1 carriers, but focusing on the tier 2 and tier 3 carriers to ensure, or service providers, to ensure that there will be a build out for rural broadband infrastructure. In addition, the FCC has a number of different programs. The E-rate program everyone's aware of that funds schools, K through 12 public schools. And then the telemedicine program, the FCC also funds specific equipment and broadband infrastructure related to the provision of telemedicine and telehealth networks. The Economic Development Administration does a lot. If you don't know your local or regional EDA representative, that's a very good relationship to have and know and to be able to build and develop, because all the applications go through the regional representative and then to EDA for funding. But the EDA provides a lot of planning grants for communities. These are smaller grants designed to encourage development of a feasibility study or market study, any type of planning grant to determine and help communities get started. In addition to, they do have funding for broadband infrastructure. And then these are just representative samples of other agencies. If there's a HUD project, HUD gives money under its community development block grant programs to provide money for broadband infrastructure. The National Science Foundation provides money for broadband related research. Department of Transportation, Homeland Security, NASA, and the Department of Energy, just to name a few. Excuse me. Sorry. So I encourage everyone to visit our website for more information. And my team and I are here if you have any specific questions on how to move forward, either with a specific project or working with a service provider in your area. Next slide, please. I also want to highlight here on our website, you'll also find that we're a one-stop for state broadband programs. Many states now have enacted funding mechanisms. We've highlighted here Minnesota, and our distinguished panelist here, Angie Dickinson, is the state broadband manager for the state. But you can also find a lot of different information about what's going on in your state, or if you're just curious about what's going on in other states. To the extent that they participate in our state broadband leaders network, that information will be available for your review on our website as well. Next slide, please. And then finally, I just encourage everyone, if you want technical assistance, you can email us at our website. At our email address here. You can submit a technical assistance form by clicking the link. Again, all this is available on our website, or you can contact me directly at my email address or direct contact number below. I want to bring attention to a featured event that we did that's archived on our website as well. Back in October of 2018, we hosted a national webinar, federal broadband funding, where we had the agency representatives from the FCC, from USDA, from EDA, and a couple of other agencies that were on our webinar and talked specifically about the various programs that they had. Now, just as a disclaimer, it was in October 2018. So some of the information specifically with the RDOF, which are in a new program, and the Reconnect program, which at the time was under development, will not be there, but you will get a good understanding of the various components of the federal broadband programs that fund broadband infrastructure and digital inclusion. So I encourage you to go to our site. You can access that webinar text and the audio file for that, and listen to that and get useful information. So thank you very much for the opportunity to address this distinguished group today, and I'll turn it back to Bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. That was really, that was just perfect. Scott, you know, in Minnesota, we tend to be pretty independent. I don't know that we've really taken advantage of the NTIA technical assistance, maybe as much as we should have. What's the intensity of that assistance? Is that on site or kind of counseling, or how does that work?
So I generally talk about it before, depending on the level of the community and where they're at, right? So we can, before a community, let's say, selects a consultant and decide which way to go, you know, we just need education. We just need to bring all of our stakeholders together and determine a path forward. You know, do we have a strategic plan? Have we conducted a feasibility study? Do we know who our local service providers are? We can help in facilitating all of those conversations. Pre-COVID-19, we would do it. We would fly in, we would do a broadband workshop or a community meeting. We don't know what this post-COVID-19 environment is going to look like. I'm sure it's going to be a lot of virtual meetings and, you know, in a virtual world. But again, most of the communities that we assist, the connectivity is an issue and they're not available to participate virtually. So I'm sure that once we open back up, you know, but we do a lot of on-site meetings, on-site. We can do it by teleconference, video conference, you name it. But the breadth of our assistance really depends on what the community needs. From broadband one-on-one education all the way through, excuse me, you know, we just need to bounce some ideas off some people who have some experience just to ensure that, you know, our thinking is in line with either what best practices are or what other communities likely situated have done.
Is that in any way kind of a pipeline then to federal funding, or is that?
So one of the things we have a relationship with the federal agencies, and generally whenever I go into a community, I always invite, you know, a representative from one of those funding organizations to join. Like you said in your previous remarks, you know, a lot of these funding opportunities are untapped or unknown. And so, you know, knowing who your federal agency representatives are, establishing a relationship with them, having them come to your organization or your community to present information regarding their programs is very beneficial.
Okay, thanks. And then one more question for you. Do you have any good examples of communities that have really stacked multiple federal programs on top of each other, the telehealth and the HUD dollars or EDA? You know, if you got, you know, you could cover your healthcare providers in your industrial parks and your low income housing. Have we got good examples of that?
So we do. Unfortunately, sometimes with the federal programs, there are limitations. So you really have to understand and devise an appropriate strategy for which funds you want to go after. For example, with EDA, there's some EDA money there's no limit. You can do an FCC, or you can do a USDA Reconnect loan with it. But there are some funds, some opportunities that are more restrictive. Generally, the strategy is that you want to do your planning grants first, because that has, you know, no direct impact to the implementation or design or build of a project. But all the rules and the criteria for each will differ. But they're just in addition to the state fund money that, you know, we talked about that's available in Minnesota. There are federal funds, there are philanthropic funds that generally don't have any restrictive provisions in terms of stacking or using other federal funds. So it'll vary, but traditionally you can use 1, 2, or more federal programs, but there are some that are restrictive in terms of how the money can be used.
Great, thank you. I see in the chat box that we've got the NTIA website up on there, so you can click on that or cut and paste that into your browser when we're done here. I seem to have caught your cough there, but I guess
it's not contagious.
Scott, you know, I'm only a foot from my screen. Stacy and Jim, I wonder if you want to give some advice to communities on how best to partner and how to kind of how that negotiation with other local funding comes into play as you're thinking about applications for, I think, especially state dollars? Stacy, do you want to go first?
Sure. I know partnering, well, obviously we're kind of good at that with our local cooperatives, and but for the last state grant, we got a hold of Aiken County. Our county is trying to being as involved as they can, and they helped us with that. They offered some financial for our project. I'm trying to put that into good words there. Other partners, you know, I think there's so many out there that we can't even touch on. I think like townships, we're potentially looking at, before all this all started, there was a township that was really pushing hard. So we were going to go talk to them and figure out how to get them involved, if there was something they could do within just that township. I know other places have done that. You know, each region is different, you know, financially, what people can afford. I know our county particularly is not the, it's a low income county, and so it's harder, you know, so seasonal. So it's a little different for us up here, but it's just trying to you know, be creative and reach out to different groups. Even I know IRRB sometimes can be a partner in Minnesota. We're lucky to have that group.
You mentioned
Yeah.
seasonality. Are you seeing your seasonal people signing up for the broadband, and do they do
For sure.
usual disconnect, or do they stay state year-round?
It's kind of half and half. We're seeing we're trying to really push the security and the monitoring of your heat and all that stuff. So a lot of them are staying on more. A lot of people are putting in cameras now at their cabins to monitor if there's anyone coming around. So it's been interesting. We offer a seasonal package for people that they can disconnect it for a lower rate, and then they turn it back on. But it's interesting to see that. I think that's becoming less and less, and people are keeping it on year round, and they're coming up to their cabins more. We're even seeing that now when people are supposed to stay home, they're coming to quarantine at their cabins. So
it's an interesting rural dilemma now.
Yes.
Bring your money, but keep your COVID at home, right?
Correct.
Good. Jim?
Yeah, I think what we look for initially, the thing that we find to be most beneficial to us is that our community partners have reasonable expectations. We kind of view these as, you know, there's a lot of money flowing into the state. And one of the things that we're running up against is the availability of construction crews to actually get the work done. So we kind of look for communities that realize that this might be a multi-phase project, and that we can do part of an area one year and another area the next. And we like to do that because the second year of a phase project, the costs go down. I mean, you're not building new fiber, you're just expanding the fiber that you've already deployed. So we just look, again, reasonable expectations. Minnesota has many challenges, weather being probably the primary one. If you've got a wet spring or you get an early snowfall, you know, I think, again, the reasonable expectations are what we look at in a community partner. And we've been fortunate to find those partners that have reasonable expectations and know that this is a long-term investment that may take 1, 2, or possibly even 3 construction seasons to complete.
Okay, thank you. Do I have any other questions out there for folks, for our speakers?
Can I just make a comment on Jim's statements?
Sure.
Barbara from Leesore County. I think one of the things that made our partnership with BAPCOM so invaluable is that you are so accessible to us. And that has made such a difference. We've worked with some other providers where it takes 2 weeks to get a call back and get routed around a lot. You guys are very accessible, and that has made such a big difference for us.
Thanks, Barbara.
Well, I do know, Barbara, that you have Bill Eccles, our CEO, probably on speed dial. So
he's my best friend.
We take pride in take pride in, having accessibility to our customers and our partners. If you call BevCom, you will always get a live person on the phone.
Yep.
And that's kind of our corporate, the way we do business. We don't like to have people have to go through 25 prompts to get to talk to a live person. When
Well,
you call
and the other
BevCom,
thing
you get a
that
live
you've
person.
done for us, Jim, is that you help us to work with the other providers, because you've been very clear that you're going to make business decisions based upon not trying to do everything at once or overextend yourself. So we work with other providers too, and you've been very helpful in helping us engage them.
Well, thank you. We're glad to help.
Any other questions? People are so shy. So in a, Jim, that 6-year return on investment, that's certainly more generous, 6 to 8 years, than a lot bigger providers. And so I think that makes your company a little easier to deal with in terms of being able to close a deal. How does that,
Well, I think it has to do with the fact that, even though we're a commercial company, we're a small community-based commercial company. And we know that for our areas that we serve, for our friends and neighbors, we know that we need to take some risks, but we also need to be able to make sure that we can make those risks pay off in the long term. So, but being a locally based company, small, we can be pretty nimble on some things, and we can maybe, to be honest, there's not a lot of choices for consumers in the areas that we serve. And I think that's all due to lack of population density. It's really hard to have a number of robust broadband providers fighting over a customer base that might have 3 or 4 customers per square mile. So that's just kind of our corporate philosophy. We virtually everybody in our company lives and works within 15 miles of the city of Blue Earth or our other areas that we serve, and so we know what our communities need to survive and be competitive in the digital age.
Great, thank you.
Bill, can I jump in?
Yeah, sure.
Hi, everybody. So great to have Scott Woods with us. Thanks so much, Scott, for joining. And I was wondering if, from your perspective, you see the whole nation, you've got a federal perspective. Do you have any advice for us here in Minnesota about best practices you're seeing in other states that we should be aware of or look to do better about our goals here in Minnesota for adoption and expansion?
Oh, excellent question. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address it. I think one of the biggest thing I think communities have to be aware of is to think strategically about how to move forward, like particularly with moving into sort of the grant and loan world. We're talking primarily federal grants. Really, answering a couple of questions, do you have the technical capability to apply to these grants? You have grant writers, do you have staff that understand all the requirements, understand that there's oversight that goes along with these federal awards, that you have to have a strategy to maintain. And then I also think too, what we're seeing, successful communities across the country that are developing robust broadband infrastructure, is data collection and mapping is a growing importance, particularly when you're dealing with service providers, because as Jim mentioned, when you have a population density that's not perfect in a business environment standpoint, you have to know where your underserved and served populations are. And more importantly, the data that underlies that will show a service provider that it is profitable to be able to build to and hold a customer base. And then for your local political stakeholders, whether it be on the state level or locally, the more data that you can collect about your customer base, about the jurisdiction that you want to expand, helps tell that story of, help build a story of need and why it's important. And so we see a lot of successful communities are basically making the case, not just the need for broadband for various, entrepreneurial for K through 12 schools, but when you start overlaying data, socioeconomic data, demographic data, some other data, it really tells a story of, why these collaborative approaches and, strategic directions are necessary.
Great. Thank you, Scott. And thank you, Jim. And thank you, Stacy. And I know that Angie just sent a little text and said, thanks everyone for the fantastic conversation. She has to be on another call right now, so she's gone, but thanks to her as well. We're gonna turn this over to Mary. She's gonna close us out, and then we're gonna keep the conference open for as long as it seems productive, and just either with talk with the speakers or just any other topic. So Mary?
Thanks, Bill, and thanks to the speakers. I echo my thanks to the speakers, and thank you to all the audience. On Tuesday at 9 a.m., we'll continue this webinar series with local broadband finance options. For more information on the series and that webinar and links to join, visit broadband.blandinfoundation.org and click on the webinars banner. You can check out the Blandin on Broadband blog later today for a recap and recording of today's webinar. We hope you share it with your friends and colleagues. And thanks again, everyone, for attending, and have a great rest of your day.